There's a particular kind of silence in British politics that speaks louder than any answer ever could. And what you're about to see isn't a politician being cautious, it's something far more calculated than that. A Jewish community has been targeted. The perpetrator has publicly claimed allegiance to Islamic State. The facts are on the table. And yet, when pressed, directly, repeatedly, without ambiguity, a Labour MP chose words so carefully hollow that they said absolutely nothing at all. Martin Dobney noticed, and he didn't let it go quietly. Watch this carefully, because what's said here matters, but what's refused to be said matters far more.
Investigation, and I don't think it's particularly responsible to comment on each individual fact as it emerges while the police are still investigating.
The police have just announced, Jim Dixon, the police have just announced he phoned and pledged allegiance to Islam. So you don't need to comment on the individual's case. These are the facts. What's your reaction to the fact that the perpetrator himself is admitting he was influenced by Islamic State?
I'm not going to comment on a live police investigation. The most important thing here, let's be clear, is that those families of the victims get justice, and I wouldn't want to say anything that prejudices that. Clearly, there are going to be bits of information and news that arises as this investigation continues. I'm sure as people make information available to the police, but I don't think a running commentary is particularly useful, other than to say I feel very confident that the police will do a good job in getting to the bottom of why this happened.
Jim Dixon, a lot of people are listening to you now and thinking, why haven't you got the guts just to say something about this case? OK, forget about the individual case itself. Now, we have a situation here where Jewish people have been killed and the responsibility by the perpetrator himself is claiming allegiance to Islamic State. Can you not just say something along the lines of, I totally condemn these kind of individuals and we must do more as a Labour government. We must do more as the Prime Minister, as the Home Secretary to clamp down on this kind of extremism on British soil.
I think the best thing we can do in this situation is to give every support to the police in finding out what happened. I think the government's been very clear that it has no truck whatsoever with extremism of any kind, religious extremism, IS, jihad, any of those things. I think we've been clear in every occasion we've had an opportunity to say that is the case. Where this concerns an individual investigation, I think it's best to let the police get on with it so that we get justice for the families and so that we can learn from this so that it doesn't happen again and we're not in this situation in a few weeks' time, 6 months' time or whenever, with families having suffered the results of extremism and terrorism.
OK, Jim Dixon, I did try, but that was a masterclass in not answering the questions. Let's move on.
Pay attention to the moment the interview shifts from an exchange into something else entirely. Here's what just happened and what it actually means beneath the surface. Jim Dixon didn't stumble. He didn't hesitate out of confusion. Every deflection was structured. Every pivot back to the police process was deliberate. This was a politician operating in full damage limitation mode. Not because the question was legally dangerous, but because the answer carried political risk. And that's the real story here. When the perpetrator himself has publicly declared his motivation, when it's not speculation, not media framing, not a contested interpretation, a simple condemnation costs nothing. Unless, of course, you've calculated that even the act of naming it clearly carries a political price tag within your own coalition. Martin Dobney understood exactly what was happening. He stripped away the parliamentary language, the procedural cover, the ongoing investigation shield, and held the mirror up directly. You're not protecting the investigation, you're protecting yourself. What this reveals about the current Labour position on extremism isn't just uncomfortable, it's telling. The government has repeatedly positioned itself as robust on security, tough on all forms of extremism. But robustness, when tested in real time, in a live interview on a specific and documented case,